Hello guys and welcome to FP1 and welcome back to the Podium podcast, this time after the Bahrain Grand Prix. 3 races to go. This one though, it had quite a serious undertone, I think, for the entirety of the race. From lap 1, obviously I'm sure everyone has seen it with the whole Romain Grosjean accident. As you might have noticed, I did put it in the description of the instant race reactions. I didn't monetize it and I'm not going to monetize this video as well. Have seen a few people doing that and it just doesn't sit right with me, so these 2 videos will not be monetized. I don't want to profit off what happened to Romain. Of course we do wish him a speedy recovery. Now, looking at the race in the whole, I'm joined by another special guest. Absolutely delighted to be joined by the Apex today. Zach, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. We've had a day after the race happened to just kind of take in everything that happened and look at it from just an objective point of view, and I'm excited to get into this one with you.
Yeah, it's going to be good fun. So, I think, we've got to start with that Roman and incident. And it took me a while to get over it, I'll be honest. I think I still woke up this morning thinking, how on earth did he survive that? I really just don't. It shows the incredible safety and the procedures of Formula 1 and how well they work, but at the same time, that was frightening. And I know when I watched it live, my mind went back to Spa 2019 and the F2 crash, which I was also watching live. And yeah, what was kind of your initial reactions to seeing the accident?
Just genuine shock. Like, I don't think in a long time, we haven't seen a car catch fire. We've seen them catch fire in the pits with fuel incidents, and that's why they had to stop refueling mid-race. But we haven't seen a collision cause a fire in decades, from what I remember. But definitely not in our lifetimes watching the sport. I was just in shock. The second the flames came up, and I was speechless for a long time, and I just tweeted out on Twitter, like, who was that? Can we at least know who that was? But yeah, I just shock.
Yeah, I think we've seen big high-speed accidents before. I'm thinking Alonso 2016. As you mentioned, we've seen accidents in the pits before. People like Massa and was it Jos Verstappen in the Benetton that caught fire in the 90s? But we've never seen. Well, we haven't seen these for a while. The two combined. I think that was really what added to the seriousnness. Not only have you got a massive fireball, the driver's trapped as well, and just thank goodness that Romain wasn't knocked out by that accident. But I think it's time we just give a massive thank you again to the safety car crews, to all of the people, all the first responders that got to the accident, because I think everything that the FIA did, from really going back from Jules Bianchi's accident in 2014, from the bringing of the halo, which it's not a debate anymore. We can't debate the halo. Nope. It saved someone's life. All of that and all of the advancements, I think, in the regulations, at least since Senna passed away, have all culminated in saving a driver's life this weekend. And that's the main thing. Yes, the halo looks ugly, but it doesn't matter anymore. They could make it look ugly. If it's safer, I don't care. And I think now any further safety devices they bring in, there's going to be no argument. There can't be an argument anymore, if you ask me. But we did get the news this morning that Pietro Fittipaldi will be the driver replacing Romain. Now, this one is exciting for me. I'm going to be making a video on it and uploading it later in the week. Or it might have been out before this one. I'm not too sure, depending on how motivated I could be to edit. But Pietro really excites me because he was one of the guys that I think was brought in at a time where he was in that same crop of drivers as George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris. The problem was there was so many good talent at that point. He sadly was the Callum Ilott effectively of that group, in that he was very good, but he was the one that fell away and ended up in IndyCar for a little bit, and now he finally gets his F1 shot. I'm really, really, really excited to see how he does. What's your reaction to that news? Because I think he could surprise people next weekend.
Yeah, honestly, I obviously knew of Pietro before this announcement was made, but I don't know much about his racing. I don't know much about his career because he's just not talked about very much. I didn't even know until now that he was in the same class as Russell and those guys. So I'm excited to see what he can do. I think it clearly sounds like he deserves the opportunity because he is the test driver for Haas. And if he performs well and does well on the car and gets him a shot in F1 sometime in the future, whether it be 22 or onwards, I think it's a great opportunity for him. He cannot waste it though. I think he knows that this is a huge chance for him to just show all the teams in F1 that he's worthy.
Yeah, I agree. I think actually the pressure's almost off him in a sense because no one's expecting him to do well.
True.
No one's really heard this name before, and no, well, obviously we've heard the name Fittipaldi, but I think Enzo's in Formula 3 at the moment, but he was kind of in the middle to the back end of the pack. He wasn't really screaming and shouting as a future F1 talent, at least not yet anyway. And Pietro as well is he's been very quiet. He's won quite a few championships in his junior career. And interesting, I'm just a little story as well. In 2018, he has signed up to a part race deal with Dale Coyne Racing in IndyCar, and he did the first race in April. He then was doing joint commitments with WEC, and in his first ever WEC race, he had a horrible crash, broke both his legs. In 2 months, he was back in an IndyCar, despite being Well, I've killed Zach with that story. But in 2 months, he was back in an IndyCar, and even though his legs hadn't even fully healed at that point, and he was back racing, which really shows the type of guy that he is. And I think it's going to be really, really exciting to see how he gets on next year. Next week. It's going to be really interesting. It is going to be really interesting. But let's move on. Let's talk about some of the other parts of the race. I think the other big story is that battle for third, that midfield. It's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. At this point in the season, any massive result is going to really tip the scales in your favour. And it was looking like that was going towards Racing Point. Looking at what happened in Turkey, looking at, Stroll had a bit of a mix-up in qualifying. I don't think it was actually Stroll's fault. It was it was an issue with the tyres or something. It was a communication problem over at Racing Point. But Perez was on fire this entire weekend. Then, of course, that went into the literal sense. 3 laps to go. He is actually on fire. I promise you I didn't make that joke on purpose, but I thought, you know what, I've said it. I've got to throw it out there now. But gutted for Sergio. I think it was really interesting to see his response to it, though, in that I think any driver that retired this weekend just didn't care. Like, they didn't mind that they'd lost these points because they'd seen Roman get out. I think there was no one... Usually we see a team or a driver moaning about, we had a rubbish weekend, but I think, in light of what happened, everyone was quite upbeat that they got through the race and that everyone was still kind of with us. But you've got to think, and I'm sure it's kind of settling for Sergio now, not only has he given up that podium, a chance of maybe one of his last podiums in Formula 1, but also the guy that's got that podium is the person he's fighting for that second Red Bull seat.
Yeah, I think I tweeted out while it happened, just the irony of that whole thing, the fact that the only reason that Albon got that podium against the guy who was gunning for his seat is because Perez had an engine failure. It was very poetic. It was kind of sad, but also funny. I don't know how I felt about it because, as a lot of people know, I'm an Albon stan. I want him to do well. I just want him to have that seat at Red Bull. I think he deserves it, but I don't think this was his podium. I think he knows that too. His reaction when he crossed the line, I think partly was because of Grosjean and partly because he knew that this wasn't his podium. It was a very poetic way for that race to end.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think the other thing that's also brought into play is McLaren, the team that really were looking least likely to take that third spot. It looked pretty much like it was Racing Points to lose. Renault might have had a chance. McLaren, despite their early season pace, seemed to be the guys that didn't have the car underneath them to get those what was it, P4 P5 that they got, or P5 P6? It was
P5 P6, I think. Yeah, P5 P6 with Carlos started in 15th.
That's amazing. Again, that weekend started. I think Norris had an issue in Q3 or didn't get the lap together, and Carlos obviously had that problem in Q2, which put him right down to 16th. So this really tips it massively in McLaren's favour. Now they've got to do. I think they need a little bit more luck to keep those points on the side. There's still 2 races left. Still a lot of points up for grabs, but it's going to take a massive effort from Racing Point, an even bigger effort from Renault now.
Yes.
Renault all of a sudden have gone from looking like third to maybe they might end up last out of these 3 teams. They've really
dropped the ball. It's tough because, and it's going to be interesting to see how all 3 of these teams fare next weekend with the Sakir Grand Prix, because it's a much more power heavy track. Usually it's been Renault Racing Point being better in a straight line than the McLarens. But as we've seen, it's basically just up for grabs. Whoever wants it gets to take it. I'd put my money on the Renaults being the top dog there, but I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, Renault have done well at those sort of tracks. I'm thinking places like Monza. I'm thinking, was it Mugello as well? I think Danny Rick especially was quite quick. Ocon as well. He seems to be getting better, and this is we get to the point in the podcast where I can either rip into Albon or rip into Ocon, but I can't really this week because they've both done a fairly good job. Ocon was, I think, the closest to Ricciardo. I think has Ricciardo out-qualified him every single race, or maybe he might have lost out once, but Ricciardo's
it's
dominated
heavily in Ricciardo's favour, yeah.
Yeah, it's at least 14-1, or it might even be 15-0, I can't remember, but Ocon's not been the driver he was at Racing Point or Force India this year, I don't think. But we saw glimpses of potential, and I think he needs to step up. Given next year as well, with Alonso coming in, if he thinks Ricciardo's a tough teammate, then I tell you what, Alonso, blimey, if Alonso's got the pace, then Ocon's in trouble. I think with Gasly also kind of in those kind of initial talks, I think with Alpine moving forward, but Ocon was great, Albon was great. Let's talk about Bottas next, because there's a lot, because Bottas he can replace the Albon section, and how rubbish was Valtteri Bottas today, and really, I've said this to you before, but and I think I put it in my initial reaction anyway, but he is in the fastest car in Formula 1 history, faster than the MP44 of 1988, faster than the F2004 of 2004. And yet he can't get past Kimi Räikkönen with a broken front wing. He can't get past Sebastian Vettel with car problems. And I'm saying, I appreciate the Mercedes is not great in traffic, but that's ridiculous. And I mean, we've seen that the Mercedes can overtake. Look at Hamilton in Monza. I think I said this when Bottas really dropped the ball at that race as well. But these last 2 weekends have not been good. And I'm thinking of comparisons to Rosberg. When Rosberg lost the championship in 2015... he lost it, I think Hamilton won the championship in the US, and then every race after that, Rosberg won. He won every single race after that, and then won, I think, the first 5 rounds of 2016. And it was that momentum shift, I think, that led on to Rosberg taking the 2016 title. I've never seen that from Bottas, and I feel like as each season goes by, he gets worse and worse and worse. I mean, what was your take on Bottas this weekend? Because it wasn't great for me.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned his battle with Kimi and Seb. The thing with those was, and there's usually the argument of, the Mercedes isn't good in traffic, but you can't call one car traffic. It was, you just can't. He has to get by there. That's a situation where he there's no excuses really. And this is coming from someone who, when I first got into Formula 1 in 2015, I was a Bottas fan. I don't know why. I've since moved on and moved to Daniel Ricciardo, but I was, and I've always kind of had a soft spot for him and tried to make excuses for him and try to see it from his side, but his performance yesterday was just bad. I don't know how else to put it, and I think the initial thought I had as being a former Bottas fan was, it's fine, he knows he's not going to beat Lewis, and he knows he's far enough ahead of Verstappen, but Verstappen's only like 11 points behind him. So he really needs to step things up over these last 2 races, because if he loses second place in the drivers, that is not going to look good on him keeping that seat. It just won't. It
really doesn't. I was surprised they signed Bottas so quickly. I think given how good George Russell has been this year, yes, he's not got a point, but that Williams car is a very difficult one in the races. And if you look at how much he's dominated Nicholas Latifi, who is not a bad driver at all. Latifi's really not as bad as people say he is, but George has just been on fire this season. And I think them snapping up Bottas was a mistake, because we almost saw George lose his seat, which would have been absolutely awful, I think, at that Williams team. And really, I can't, I mean, I've said this every year, but I can't see Bottas staying on past 2021.
No, I think my thing with that was, I think COVID really changed that whole situation. I don't think Bottas was supposed to stay for 21 because the regulations were supposed to change. I think they want to bring George in for that first season of the new regulations. And I think when we got the news that the cars were staying the same, their hand was kind of forced, and it just doesn't look good on them. It looks like the wrong call. And that's why it's only a 1-year contract, because they know the second George is ready, Bottas is out of that seat. And I think Valtteri knows that as well. So I think he's just kind of playing into that second driver role just naturally because of that situation. But there's times like the race yesterday where it's like you just want that bit more from him because he can overtake. He has the potential to be a good driver. So I kind of hope he ends up at a team elsewhere after he leaves Mercedes. I'm not sure if there'll be room for him anywhere, but if there is, that'd be great because I would love to see him back in a team that he can actually perform at rather than just assisting his, legendary teammate.
I do feel like when Bottas leaves, he will be that season's Ocon or that season's Perez or that season's Hulkenberg, and that he's a driver that probably deserves to be in Formula 1 but isn't going to get that shot anywhere else, either because he's too expensive or it's not a good project for him, or that team have... I think with the way that the driver academies are set up now, it's no longer a case of a driver can move from any team to any other team. It's that those tunnels are a lot more walled in, if that makes sense. It's much more of a linear path in that Toro Rosso drivers will go to Red Bull, and then, say Haas or Alpha drivers will go to Ferrari. It doesn't really happen so often. Obviously, we've seen a few different changes this year again because of COVID, but I think as young drivers become more of the focus, we've seen the likes of Leclerc and Russell and Norris, Albon maybe do okay or do well, and I think Bottas, he's been in F1 for a long time now, and as soon as he does lose that Merc seat, he's on his way out. But I think we're jumping a little bit far ahead of time. Let's end this episode off by looking at a few predictions. I think we're staying in Bahrain for next weekend at the Sakir Grand Prix. Yes. It's the Noval, the new oval as they're calling it.
I like that.
I do like it. I think it's going to be very interesting. I think you've already mentioned Renault have a strong contention there. I think given the type of track that's going to be, I think it could really be up in the air. Not just for F1, but F2 as well. The F2 Championship is going to be wrapped up.
That's going to be the go Mick.
I mean, we already know that Mick and Nikita Marzipan are going to be the guys stepping up into that Haas seat. But whether you love or hate that, it is what it is. But I think the other driver we need to focus on F2 is Yuki Tsunoda, because he's also on the limit of whether he gets that super license or not after his poor weekend this time. He's a little bit on the edge there, and that could lead to someone maybe interesting, maybe a Hulkenberg, maybe then keeping on Kvyat and AlphaTauri for another year. Can Vips get in? Who knows? But that'll be interesting for sure as well. But let's think about the Noval, the Sakir Grand Prix. Could you give me a top 3 prediction and a bold prediction for the race?
Well, I think the thing with me is I'm going to go with a cookie cutter safe prediction, because anyone who's watched my channel knows that I've gone with, some edgy predictions in the past and they have not gone well. So I'm going to go Hamilton, Bottas, Verstappen for the podium. That's the safest way to go. I don't want to stray from that too much. And my bold prediction, as we've kind of hinted at towards in this video, is I think Daniel Ricciardo is going to get a P4 and help Renault just kind of spice up that third place battle just a bit. I just think they have the best straight line speed, and Daniel Ricciardo is Daniel Ricciardo. We have all these heavy braking zones in the Noval, and we know how he does in those, so I think it's going to be Daniel Rick.
I tell you what, I do wonder if the Noval could become the new layout at Bahrain if this proves to be a good race. But
if it's good, I feel like it's going to be very DRS trainy. That has a potential of being DRS trainy. If it is, then no. But if it's good, then sure, I'm down.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, I'm really struggling with the top 3, because I'm thinking about races like Imola, races like Mugello, where we've had this new circuit. Turkey's another one, and really everything's been thrown up in the air, and I think we could be in for our last weird podium of the season. I mean, we've had a lot, and I wouldn't mind if we don't get one. We've had our fair share this year, more than we normally get. But I'm going to go for a weird podium prediction. I'm going to say Hamilton to win it still, just because every new circuit's come on, Hamilton's won. But I'm going to say Bottas is another shocker, so let's put Verstappen second. And third, I was going to put Ricciardo, but to spice things up a little bit, let's chuck Sergio Perez in there. I think that racing point has a lot more to give. And I think Sergio's going to come back fighting next weekend. And there's a bold prediction. I'm going to say, I've hinted at it already, I'm going to go with a double one for this, but Pietro Fittipaldi to surprise people, and has to have a good weekend just because I want to have a good weekend. I think given what's happened in the last 24 hours as we're recording, Haas they've been that team that everyone kind of loves to hate at times, But I think everyone's going to be rooting for Haas a little bit next weekend and hope that they can have a bit of a better result than what they had, obviously, on Sunday. But that's my thoughts on it anyway. Shuri, do you want to end things off just by talking a little bit about your channel, what you do over there?
Yeah, sure. Over at the Apex, I kind of like to look at things that most channels don't even think of that they want to know about F1. So last week I talked about the F1 driver mustaches. I did a tier list on that. I talked about the F1 broadcasting and kind of my perspective on that since I'm a broadcasting student. That's kind of a good way to know what goes into the broadcasts and why they're so entertaining. So yeah, I just like diving into the super niche, super weird topics about F1 because that's kind of what I like.
So where would my moustache go in that tier list, do you think?
Top tier.
Thank you.
100%.
It is utterly awful, I'll be honest, but Movember is Movember at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Exactly. I'll embarrass myself for a few weeks with it. But anyway, make sure you do go and subscribe to Zach at the Apex. All links that will be down in the description below. Thank you, mate, for joining me on this one. Guys, let me know your predictions as well for the Sakir Grand Prix next weekend. And yeah, obviously, again, all thoughts going out to Romain Grosjean. Hope that he makes a speedy recovery. I do hope that he can kind of... I want him to come back for Abu Dhabi. I think we all want him to come back for Abu Dhabi. And even if it is just like a lap of honour, like a slow lap in a Haas car, that'd be really good to see, I think. Just FIA, make that happen. Just make that happen. But yeah, anyway, let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and of course subscribe as well. And I will see you all in the next one.